So y'all ready? You all set?
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Are these the people out here?
This is where the people are. This
All
is
right.
where the people are.
I like to know where the people are. I've always got my eye on the people.
If you want to make eye contact, you make eye contact right there.
Okay.
All right. What's up, everybody? Corey Singletary here with another episode of CUB Tracks. And unlike normal, I do not have Tom with me. Today, I have our General Counsel, Cara Coburn Faris. You want to introduce yourself? Say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm not Tom. I'm Cara, and it's really great to be here.
So when we grew CUB from an office of three dudes in a small office that on any given day we were afraid was going to fall apart around us, to the team that we have today, advocating on behalf of small customers. We brought you on, as well as Steve Keim, and most recently Ted. And Tom and I have been talking that we thought it would be nice if folks could get to know our team. So you graciously volunteered to be the guinea pig to go first.
Here I am.
So we thought, this is the opportunity. We can get you in front of a mic, in front of a camera, and you can kind of tell your little story of yourself and CUB. And I guess, going from maybe stuff that people have seen, but you can kind of put it in your own words. I guess I can start with, I don't know, do you want to give a little background on you before you came to CUB? And
Sure, I can do that. So I have done quite a range of things in the nonprofit, government, and corporate world. So I actually started, when I graduated from college, I worked for an airline, and I was forecasting loads. So that was back when we didn't have a lot of tools for that sort of analysis. Now a lot of it is automated. But back then I was figuring out when people would be flying to Tokyo and how much they might be willing to pay. And I was using a lot of Excel spreadsheets and overbooking flights and trying to, turn away customers who weren't going to pay a lot. So it was fun. I traveled a lot. It really taught me a lot about corporate America. And I knew that was not the home for me in the long run. So I did a variety of things. I lived abroad. I went to law school. And I sort of went to law school with a goal of doing public interest work. And I worked at a legislative service agency in Wisconsin for a couple of years after law school, doing policy analysis, which was just a really great introduction to the agencies and the legislature and how government works in Wisconsin. I lived out of state for a while and really realized, though, that I wanted to not so much be commenting on what was going right and wasn't going right in government, but being more involved in what was happening. So worked part-time for a long time doing a variety of things. And then when the time was right, CUB was looking for a general counsel, and it was just a really good match. I love this kind of work because it's policy, it's wonky, it's analysis, but it's also things that matter to people, and I feel like I'm making a positive difference, and I'm working for the public interest and representing those.
so you got a little bit into that. So what in particular, why are you excited to be part of the CUB team?
Well, it is a very exciting time in energy and utility regulation. There is so much change happening at such a rapid pace, and we're all here to try to make sure that that in that process of moving away from carbon-emitting fuels into renewable energy and cleaner energy, that the customers are not left behind. And there is a tendency in our capitalistic world for when there's an opportunity, which we have now, we have mandates, we have opportunities to make these big investments. There is, of course, a race from the private sector to profit from that. And that's the way our economy is set up. But these monopoly investor-owned utilities have a counterbalance, which is CUB in Wisconsin, and hopefully other customers and customer groups who are representing the people who pay for those investments.
So you'd mentioned, you had a variety of work experience. You worked in the audit bureau, so you had a sense of kind of administrative practice in Wisconsin law and whatnot. But coming into the team, you didn't really have much in the way of, deep experience in the utility industry. Can you talk a little bit about, you've been here about a little over a year and a half, kind of what that's been like coming from someone who, maybe has more of sort of a person on the street perspective on what the utilities are like, and then over the last year or so, as you've helped us with the work, what that kind of sort of learning curve has been like, that experience has been like for you.
Mm-hmm. So I think the most eye-opening realization that I've had is just how profitable utilities are, and how much money these monopolies make, and how challenging, how widespread the challenges are for customers to pay their bills. I've also learned a lot about just the disparities among customers and why those happen. And I had some background. I had done some poverty work in law school and after that in different capacities. But it really has become more and more clear to me how important, affordable utility services are for everybody.
What's been the most difficult thing? And maybe you've checked that off your list of I understand this 100% now, but coming in, and learning the industry and kind of learning about what we do and how the whole process works and the whole machine of regulation in Wisconsin works. What's been for you the most sort of challenging thing to either understand or, come to grips with or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many technical things that are challenging. So right now I'm thinking about fuel rules and things like that because last year we had, kind of some big rate case stuff, but we weren't doing as much fuel reconciliation. So, but I would say what's the hardest for me is kind of, I don't yet have, because I haven't gone through many cycles of rate cases and then reopeners and construction dockets and then those going into rate cases and transmission projects and those going into rates. I'm how dynamic everything is a challenge. So how to really understand cost effectiveness in the present when you know that there are going to be significant changes next month, next year, in terms of what's available for, the generation portfolios, what customers are looking at, what their demand is, efficiency, how much transmission is needed, how that transmission is going to be valued, and how things are calculated with FERC. That's all changing. So there are just so many moving parts. And fortunately, I feel very, very fortunate to have technical experts in my office who I can walk up to anytime and say, I don't get this, and we can look at a spreadsheet together or talk about an issue and we can come back to it. Anytime that we're, looking at a particular case, we can talk through issues, and we do all the time. And so that is very helpful to me as the person who is writing the briefs and sort of trying to high level kind of simplify and synthesize all of the technical information that goes into a rate case or a larger proceeding, a big construction docket or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and they change and move all the time. And I think you're right. As you go through a few cycles, you start to connect those red pieces of string on the big wall of crazy.
Yeah.
That is the utility industry in Wisconsin, and that's usually often just even for one utility, connecting all those lines can be challenging. Yeah,
and I think there is so much that we don't know yet about what's going to happen. There are so many contentious issues that need to be resolved. And once they're resolved, they'll need to be revisited. So it's just, it's dynamic and it's fun.
The two of us were actually in a meeting earlier today where that came up in terms of there are things that are going to change that people even really haven't, started to grapple with yet. It's really easy to kind of wrap your brain around, okay, we're going to turn off a coal plant and we're going to put some solar, we're going to put some batteries or whatever the case might be. That swappity-doo is easy to figure out.
Yeah.
But there's all the other moving parts in terms of, all the regulation and the rules and the rates and everything that makes the whole industry go. That you're right. There's a lot of, at least right now, maybe not in the 20, 30, 40 years up preceding the last decade, but right now there's a lot of sort of dynamism in the industry and a lot of change.
Right. And the technological changes. We're always thinking about battery storage and what's going to happen. We hope for great things with respect to battery storage, but that is. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not working on those things. And
yeah, batteries. I know the cooperatives in the western part of the state are looking at small modular nuclear as an alternative for them, and what that potentially means for the rest of the state if those projects end up faring well for them.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes in the technology. What's been sort of your, this is obviously subject to change in the future, but sitting here right now, what's your favorite topic, issue, thing in the utility regulation or consumer advocacy, part of the job here?
I do really love when I get to take, the fundamental legal principles and apply them to something like return on equity. So when I can go back to, my favorite case, natural gas pipeline, 1942, and talk about how, the customers are always need to be a part of the consideration. One of the things that really, it was an adjustment for me to see the extent to which the process of the regulatory process, in a contested case, seemed to be driven by what the utilities wanted and not so much what was best for the customers. And often the utilities have have a lot of resources to argue their position. Mm-hmm. And it's a power dynamic that is very challenging, but one that, I think we're just going to keep repeating ourselves and showing the evidence for why this may or may not be good for customers, and continuing to just, try to shift that perspective away from, what the utilities want and what they need to, what is best for the customers, because ultimately regulation is to be in the public interest. And it is in the public interest for IOUs to have profits and to be able to invest when they need to. But we need to be looking at that, making sure that they are making the choices that are best for the customers at the same time. So I see it really as a cooperative. More so than I realized when I started. I see the importance of and the value of working with utilities, understanding their perspective, not just in a contested case, but with policy issues, and just keeping those conversations going and trying to just maximize the public interest, as opposed to seeing everything as a fight or a zero-sum game.
Yeah, I think like Tom and I talked about that in a previous show. It probably would surprise people, how often that we do try, where possible, to collaborate with the utility to come up with, the best solution in the interest of the customer. Because oftentimes, you're not going to come up with the best, necessarily the best solution in a hearing room, in a contentious litigation setting where everyone is counting their wins and losses on the board as you go along.
Right, especially when, let's be honest, they can out-resource us every time. So we have to be smart about what we take on, and we really have to keep an open mind and be as collaborative while also just always putting the customer first.
So you've been kind of, on the inside, behind the curtain now for a little bit. What do you think is something that the average customer maybe doesn't know or doesn't understand about how the utility industry or even just the utilities work that you think would be really eye-opening for them if they...
I mean, I do think that it would be interesting for customers to know what level of resources utilities put into, for example, a rate case where they're proposing to significantly increase customer rates. And I think it would be eye-opening to see the resources that they put into arguing for high profit margins. I think some customers, looking back at the thousands of comments in the recent WEC rate case, I think customers are more and more aware of that. And I think interest groups and community groups are doing a good job of kind of talking about that power dynamic and talking about that reality and getting people fired up about it. But I think if more people knew, I think they'd be even more fired up. And, quite frankly, in the past 30 years, wealth disparities have increased, and corporations, it's not just, utilities, it's across the board. Corporations have grown more and more wealthy, and, wealth has gotten more concentrated. And I think it's, something that is really hurting the average family, the middle class family, the working class family, people who have challenges, don't have safety nets.
You think that's the hook, like the sexy, like on the ground grassroots activism, like hook to like get people to be like, no, I know the environment's important, but I'm gonna make, this year I'm gonna spend my time, free time, like volunteering to get out the word on utility issues and get people involved in their rate cases. Because Tom and I have struggled for the last like 6 years, like how do we make this as interesting to people and get them as invested in things that maybe do like tug at our heartstrings a little bit more, or maybe a little bit easier to grasp, like the environment or politics and things like that. I mean, do you think that sort of power dynamic and that disparity is that the hook for people? I feel
like corporate power and wealth disparities are pretty sexy, and people are, I think they're pretty fed up these days. So I do think, we have some great groups in Wisconsin and nationwide who are talking about the imperative to make this energy transition as absolutely quickly as we possibly can. And I think CUB is on board with that. But, to borrow a phrase from the Center for sorry.
It's okay. All our brains from time to time, the train just jumps the tracks. It's all right.
Okay. So you can cut that out. To borrow a phrase from the Center for Humane Technology, we need to undertake this transition as fast as we can do it well. So, at the pace of getting it right. I feel like CUB has a really, really important role to play in that, because we support all of those clean energy goals, but we want to make sure that it doesn't result in more wealth for the wealthy and more challenges for those who already have challenges.
So maybe related to that a little bit, from a big picture perspective, why do you feel like CUB is important to the state of Wisconsin?
Well, I think that the commission and the commission on up really looks to CUB. The legislature created us, and they created us so that we could have, monopoly utilities operating in Wisconsin. I think without that counterbalance, there might be some constitutional issues with the way that Wisconsin is run. And so, let's see. Stop. Rewind. Let me think about your question.
All right, we can circle back to that. So maybe,
why are we important to the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah, I mean, just as a big picture, why CUB, why are we critical to, the state of Wisconsin, the future of Wisconsin, right? The six of us in this little office.
Yeah.
Why us?
So I think that because of our technical capability, we are really equipped to make those arguments, to kind of see the big picture in terms of what things mean to customers, and not just the low to middle income customers, but to all customers. And we also have, the relationships with some of the other players, and so I think we kind of have a history of working well in that way, and collaborating with other public interest groups. And, again, we are, the commission depends on us in a way that the commission might not depend on an organization that was not created by the legislature.
I think, as you mentioned, we provide that. We provide our role. Everyone's got a job to do in this area, and as you mentioned before, our job is to kind of provide that counterbalance, that counterpoint to the utilities, and make certain that as you've mentioned, that the commission can see, someone representing the customer's perspective and the customer's needs, when it makes its decisions.
Right, and I think, as you've said before, we are data-driven, and of course we are nonpartisan, and so, I think that we can continue to have a strong voice by kind of remaining independent and as objective as possible. And in my mind, the things that we argue for are absolutely evidence-based, and that makes it even easier to, take the law and the facts and run with it. It really fortifies our positions.
Yeah, that was something that, it didn't occur to me until a number of years after I've been kind of in this field that it's not like a lot of other activism. It's not a lot like a lot of other, community action agencies or folks that advocate on behalf of low-income groups or any group of citizens, in that it's important that the stories and the experiences of the individuals be brought before the decision maker, right?
Mm-hmm.
We encourage folks to participate in the rate making process, to file comments, and as you mentioned, a lot of folks participated last year with We Energies and Wisconsin Public Service. But you mentioned that technical expertise, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, or they're not aware that it's not enough to tell the stories. You also have to have the sort of empirical evidence to back that up, to bring both parts of that, because it is unfortunately, very wonky economic regulation at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it is great that we have, new interveners who are speaking from the heart and from personal experience. We don't have the capacity to provide that sort of evidence, so we absolutely need it. And I'm grateful for those interveners, and I hope that they continue to participate.
So maybe looking forward, obviously, we'll have, in terms of just the normal workload, we'll have 3 big rate cases, we'll have 2 reopeners, we have about 3 construction dockets right in front of us right now. But setting that aside, is there something like looking forward, you're like, man, I really want to work on X issue. There's something really cool that I want to learn about, or I want to get involved with in this field. Anything that that you're excited about that you want to kind of get your hands into?
Yeah, I mean, I think EV policy is really, really fun. I've had an EV for like 3 years, and it is fun to see, how that's all being worked out. I mean, talk about dynamic. We have our regular utilities, but then we have charging stations, and we have these batteries that can move all around. It can move around the state, can move around the country, in our cars. And so that's pretty exciting. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And so it's fun to see how different parties are talking about the costs and the benefits. And I think very, very important to make sure that all customers are protected. We obviously have a lot of people who might not be considering purchasing EVs because it's way out of their price range right now. And it's exciting that they're becoming more affordable and more mainstream, but we need to make sure that is done in a way that keeps it fair.
Yeah, that's it. You were talking, and in terms of people buying EVs and whatnot, and it occurred to me that I believe by July, that half the office will be driving EVs, and
I was thinking about that too.
which is interesting. I mean, I think in the past we haven't been able to, and it's hard to do when you're a witness. Like my job usually is to be like a technical witness, to bring in personal experience. Usually you're drawing from the literature or research and whatnot, and I think EVs are going to be one of those things where even like the technical witnesses are going to be bringing their own personal narrative to some of these policy discussions before the commission. So that's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah. There are, you really think about the issues regarding, for example, geography of chargers in Wisconsin differently once you try to drive your EV around Wisconsin, especially north.
It is that is going to be a challenging issue, and that is definitely one that is going to be front and center this year. I know we've talked about it. Tom and I have talked about it in a number of episodes, but it'll probably start making the rounds in the press in June after a certain application from a certain company drops.
Yep.
So that'll be fun, I think.
I think it will. Lots of really sticky issues. So lots to talk about.
Lots to talk about. Yeah. So I don't know. Is there anything? I don't know. Any last thoughts? At least for today. We'll have you back on. Any last thoughts today? Again, thinking in terms of what maybe from your perspective, again being new, but also in terms of your role here with CUB. What do you think that is the first number one thing the average customer could do to empower themselves to participate more in this process?
That is a really good question, and it's something I think about all the time, because we have so many members and we serve such a broad constituency, which is basically every individual utility ratepayer in Wisconsin, and some of the small businesses and farms as well. And so personally, knowing, what this has always been a puzzle for me in my public interest work generally, is you're advocating for people and you're speaking on behalf of them. And I always want to make sure that I'm representing them accurately. And that gets more complicated when you have, millions of people who you're representing. So I think we've seen an effective model in, community groups getting before the commission, but that requires resources. And in my ideal world, all communities would have, that sort of representation where they could sort of consolidate their viewpoints into one representative who goes before the commission. Until then, I would say keep submitting comments. I know that the commissioners read them and pay attention to them, and it's kind of like voting. The more there are, the louder they are, and it makes a splash when there are thousands of comments in a docket. And I think it also makes a splash when there aren't any. I think when there aren't comments, I think maybe the commission thinks that people don't care. So, but rewinding from that, the reality is that it's very complicated to understand what's going on and to kind of know when there is an issue before the commission. And so part of what I would hope that CUB could eventually do, and I'm not quite sure, this is my wish list, is to come up with an interface for the public, for the people who care, that they can use to kind of find out what's happening and what issues or contested cases are ripe for comment, and where they can find the information they need to submit useful, meaningful comments that might move the needle. So just, I think public participation is really hard right now, and I certainly would not put that on individual consumers. It's our full-time jobs, and it's even hard for us sometimes to keep on top of everything that's happening at the commission. So I would love for that to be more efficient, and for better ways for people to get directly involved if they want to.
Sounds like a really good plug for people to subscribe to the podcast so they can stay on top of all the things that matter to them or things that they might find interesting. But this has been great. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for spending the time.
Thank you. It's fun.
And like I said, we'll definitely find more opportunities to bring you back on.
Yeah. Talk about issues.
There's all kinds of fun stuff.
I love it.
But again, thank you again. Thank you for everyone for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.